Hello, I'm Ryan Nixon, your friendly neighborhood political scientist. This is the second video in my international relations series. I made the first video almost 3 years ago. So there's been somewhat of a delay between the first one and this one. But what can I say? Life got in the way, and better late than never. Um, so this is the first video in a three-part module explaining the transformation from organizational chaos to what we see today. In this module, we're trying to get from early human society to the system that we have today, which is a system of states governed only by anarchy. That is, there's no international police force out there empowered to arrest states for misbehaving. I'm not talking about the a symbol with the circle around it type of anarchy. I'm talking about structural forces that compel states to behave in certain ways. Because it's a self-help system, when country A wrongs country B, who's country B going to call? They have to do it themselves. And if that means go to war, then that means go to war. But we can talk about the anarchical system in a later video. First, let's examine the two pictures on the screen. On the left is a city-state. This is the Acropolis in Athens. And on the right is, well, two states. On the right is the border fence between the United States and Mexico, and on the left is a wall built around the Acropolis after the Greco-Persian War. And many people, including Thucydides, who we'll look at later on, believe that the building of the wall was at least partially responsible for the outbreak of war in the Aegean Sea during the Peloponnesian War. So that begs the question, do walls lead to war? Does building a wall lead to war? Well, first, we have to ask the question, what is a wall? In some circumstances, it's a defensive measure in the case of Athens, and not so much defense in the way of the United States. It's more of a political symbol than it is protection. Mexico cannot harm American national security. No matter how many people come across the border, the United States is pretty secure. It's not going to cease to exist. Mexico is not going to declare war on the United States and overtake us. There might be changes in demographics based on immigration, but that's not a national security threat. But both, so these walls are different. One leads to war possibly, and one doesn't. But they both illuminate the central tenet in international relations. That is the line on the map. The line on the map creates states and therefore creates the anarchical system. The United States, cannot put a wall on its border unless it recognizes Mexico's sovereignty. It's not putting the wall 50 miles inside of Mexico's territory. It's saying, we understand that this is where our land stops and their land begins, so we're putting the wall on our side. But we're not here to talk about walls. We're here to, talk about, organization from chaos. So we need to go pretty far back in human history. Let's go all the way back to Lucy, Australopithecus. She lived around 3 million years ago. Australopithecus were mainly foragers. They ate fruit and the occasional small animals such as rodents, lizards, and like human beings, Homo sapiens, that is, they were hominids. They walked upright, but very little of their behavior is what we would refer to as human. their organization was what we might call primitive. Fast forward a few million years, you get to us, that is human beings, Homo sapiens. This is me on the right. I'm giving a lecture about nuclear proliferation at Brookhaven National Laboratory in June 2018. This was part of their nuclear safeguards and national security in the 21st century. I believe that's what the course was called. I might be mistaken on that. It was something like that. So first, all human beings originated in Africa. Early human tribes organized many of their social affairs around hunting. They had a taste for elephant. Here we see a group of 15 or so human beings throwing sharpened spears to take down the giant beast. As human beings expanded, as human beings ran out of elephants, they started expanding their territory and taking on, building more and more tribes, taking on more territory, and eventually they spread to other continents. Here are two human beings in South America hunting the glyptodon, which they hunted to extinction. Human beings have been very good at hunting animals completely to extinction. If you go back far enough in our history, that's basically what we did for the majority of the time that we've spent on Earth. And that's about it. That's what human beings did. They woke up, they organized around eating, around gathering resources for the clan. And sometimes that meant, taking spears out and hunting the elephant or the glyptodon. And they came back and they did basic stuff. They had basic social interactions that we all have. They mated. Maybe they came up with shared myths about the human soul, about the afterlife, and about monsters that lived in the woods over there or in the forest over there. Mostly life was pretty simple for early humans, although it was also pretty violent. If you want an illuminating and thought-provoking read on the origins of human behavior, including the origins of violence, check out Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind by Yuval Noah Harari. I highly recommend it. It's a fantastic read. But we need something to mitigate the violence around us. We need a guiding philosophy. We didn't yet have rational thinking, but we're getting there. Eventually we had Plato, we had Socrates, Aristotle, and they helped us temper the violence that plagued us. Then we relied on religious texts such as the Bible, the Quran, the Bhagavad Gita to navigate the seemingly chaos and violence around us. And in enough time, humans discovered how to process what they were seeing around them. What they were seeing was the evidence, and they learned how to process that using reason. And eventually that led to the scientific revolution. For today's lecture, the first of these thinkers that we're going to look at is Thomas Hobbes. He's the author of the Leviathan. For Hobbes, Hobbes survived the English Civil War, and it was bloody, and he was traumatized by it. He asked the question, how do we stop this from happening again? How do we stop human beings from killing each other? So he struggled with this trauma that was inflicted on the whole nation, and he wanted to find a way to avoid future conflicts. So he came up with the idea of the Leviathan. Politics, he noted, that is, the struggle over ideas, leads to great human suffering. Humans are inherently evil, inherently selfish. The problem to Hobbes is that of original sin. It is the problem of the soul, of human nature. Life, Hobbes says, is, quote, solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. Politics just muddles things and it causes people to fight. Order and politics are incompatible. Politics being the struggle over ideas is going to mean that discussions lead to conflict over who gets what, when, and how much. So you need to get rid of politics. You need a Leviathan. If you want to get people to behave, threaten them with execution, according to Hobbes. The primary human motivator is avoiding death, especially violent death. So if you say, if you do X, I will kill you, and I have the power to do it, then you don't do X, you do some other letter of the alphabet. Hobbes figured that if human nature is the problem, then a powerful state, a Leviathan, can overcome human nature. The Leviathan imposes order over its subjects. And if anyone deviates from the imposed order, the punishment is death. You just kill them. In Hobbes' world, human civil rights cause disorder, so they have to go. But then comes Jean-Jacques Rousseau, about 100 years later, and he's writing Discourse on Inequality. Rousseau comes to a different conclusion to the question of conflict, to the question of violence. He argues that humans are naturally peaceful. We are compassionate until we're pushed into conflict. He believes that private property causes inequality, and inequality leads to conflict. And in a perfect world, humans wouldn't have inequality. They would have equal access to resources. But the world isn't perfect and inequality abounds. And he argues that inequality without state intervention is a recipe for disaster. So state intervention looks sort of Hobbesian so far. Is it a monolithic juggernaut that imposes order over its subjects? No, he says that we should have a social contract with the state. The state operates its monopoly of violence according to our will, and we can take that away if the state misbehaves. Contrary to Hobbes, this actually requires bringing politics into the discussion, have a social discourse. There are alternatives to the social contract. Authoritarianism, this is very Hobbesian, and also patriotic devotion that rejects Rousseau's social contract, because the social contract is at the will of the people, which is subject to change. And so these alternatives are viable. We've seen them work before, but they don't solve the problem of inequality. So we can compare the two. To Hobbes, the problem is human nature. To Rousseau, it's a systemic problem. It's the structure that we've created. To Hobbes, the problem is unchangeable. Humans are humans and will behave as humans behave. To Rousseau, it's just difficult to change the system. To Hobbes, the state is the solution. To Rousseau, sure, the state's the solution, but it's also part of the problem. So you always have to keep modifying the contract. To Hobbes, the state requires overwhelming power. It requires a monolithic entity that imposes order. To Rousseau, the ultimate answer is a restrained state, a social contract, using bargaining, that is politics, to enhance cooperation. Both Hobbes and Rousseau assume, without much evidence, that they assume certain truths about human nature, but there might be a better way to A, determine whether humans are inherently violent, a la Hobbes, or B, determine whether the state can even manage human affairs and reduce conflict. So we need an alternate route. We need the scientific method. And here we can look at two species, human beings and chimps. These two creatures are roughly the same age, a human child, a chimp child. We share 99% of our DNA. That means that 1% accounts not only for the differences in appearance, but also all differences in intelligence. It accounts for language, differences in language. It accounts for religion. As far as we know, chimps don't have religion. It accounts for abstract thought. Can chimps lie? Maybe. Can they invent shared myths like religion? As far as we know, no. It accounts for all art, all music, poetry. The fact that you can understand this video is a part of that 1% difference in DNA. The chimp can't understand this video as far as we know. So are human beings naturally violent? Or maybe the better word is inherently violent. Something that keeps me up at night is I wonder, what happened the first time? So go back in history far enough and you had one clan of human beings and then they split. And let's say that they split into two and one clan went this way, one clan went that way, and they forgot about each other. What happened the first time, say 10 years later, when this clan thinks that they're the only human beings in existence, this clan thinks they're the only humans, and they run into each other for the first time. What did they do? Did they run away and hide? Was their first instinct based on their autonomic responses? Fight or flight? Did they start planning wars of offense or defense? Did they assume that the other clan was going to attack them, so they better attack first? Well, we don't know. That's why it keeps me up at night trying to figure this out. We don't have very good evidence. We have analogous evidence. But, we work with what we got. We can apply the scientific method. So you can look at Demonic Males by Richard Wrangham and Dale Peterson. Chimps and humans share many behavioral traits. For example, male-driven violence. We can't go back in time and examine prehistoric human societies to see what kind of violence they were dealing with. So we have to look at chimps. Chimp warriors often isolate a neighboring male. They will kill him, and then they will seek out the other males one by one, plucking them off. After killing all of the males, they will take the female chimps as sexual property. This analogous evidence suggests that human males might be predisposed to violence. But then again, we find violence abhorrent. So the question is, can the state solve the problem with violence? Again, we can't go back in time to observe prehistoric humans, but we can look at groups of humans today, such as various tribes in Papua New Guinea. We can look at the Yanomami people of the Amazon. These groups are in constant states of warfare. They isolate and kill neighboring males. They take the females as sexual property. It looks very similar to how chimps behave. So yeah, maybe humans have a predisposition to violence, and maybe we need a state to temper our impulses. Another great book to look at is Steven Pinker's The Better Angels of Our Nature. People have strong feelings about Steven Pinker. Either they love him or they hate him. Ignore all of that discussion and focus only on the book, only on the words that he has written. And he says that to some extent, yeah, Hobbes is correct. The ability of the state to dish out justice makes interpersonal violence less necessary. Hey, if the police um, will arrest and execute someone for murdering your loved one, you have no need to risk your life tracking that person down and dishing out revenge. You don't have to take the law into your own hands. You can just let the police do their job. He also says that increased literacy rates increases communication, and that this increases empathy. Modern cooperative relationships means that neighbors are worth more to us alive than dead. Think about that for a minute. Germany at one point just wreaked havoc on the European continent. And today they are in strong economic relationships with every country in Europe. Germany, no one's going to beat up Germany for the sins that they did during World War II because, hey, the trade relationship is so strong. Steven Pinker says that the increasing ability to use reason, and to solve problems reduces the need to resort to violence. There's innumerable solutions to any given problem. Violence is the easiest one. Hey, if someone wrongs you, you just punch them in the face. That's a solution to the problem. However, it's not always the best solution to the problem. Maybe a lawsuit is. He says, therefore, violence, including sexual violence, is not compatible with modern standards. We might be predisposed to murdering people, but we now live in a world where we don't think about it. It doesn't cross our minds. We would much rather get into financial relationships. We would much rather, use nonviolent means to solve our conflicts. So is this international relations? No, it's not international relations yet. This is just, we're talking about civil war, philosophy about human nature, anthropological studies into chimp and human violence. We haven't gotten to an international system of states governed only by anarchy yet. So we need to fast forward. We need to go to the next thing. The next step in human organization is the empire. So in the next video, part 2 of this 3-part module, we're going to look at empires. We're going to look at whether or not the empire is the best way to mitigate violence through using the state. So until then, thank you for watching. See you.